Welcome back to Talk TV with me, David Bull, Esther Krakow and James Marlowe, who joins us to whiz us through today's papers. So let's move on now, shall we, to talk about Keir Starmer. Where is he?
Well, I mentioned the name Keir Starmer simply because he is saying that when he comes into power, if he gets into power, he's demanding a halt to autumn hike energy prices. Now, of course, that's going to be before he comes into power because, of course, there's not going to be a general election for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And this is the old story again about, which is dominating the news, of course, fuel prices. To give you an idea about this, last December, winter time, we were looking at the average, they say the typical household, the average monthly price was around £106.
Right.
Up to 2 months ago, the average tip for a typical household was or is £355 per month. So that means it is more than tripled. It's still rising right now. Of course, I don't need to say that this is causing a great deal of anxiety, to put it mildly, terrifying people, in other words, not just those on real low incomes, but those in the middle class, even the upper middle class as well, because they've got their expenses.
Well, absolutely, and of course we know it's going up to something like 3,700. We now think it's going up to over £4,000. Now, this is totally unaffordable for most people.
That's exactly what Sir Keir is saying.
Yes, but that's all very well. But I do not understand how we've got to this situation. The fact is that, and I've heard from many of our viewers who are saying, look, when I look at what my incoming, what I get in, I'm getting £1,000. Then my rent comes out of that. Then I'm spending 400 quid on energy. I have no money for food.
I mean, some people are blaming, the price cap actually for fueling this kind of rise, because at the end of the day, it doesn't fuel competition between these companies. If you have a cap, they're obviously going to always aim for the maximum cap, even if you readjust it 3 or 4 times.
But they've struggled because many have gone out of business, haven't they?
But there's that as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm very glad you brought up that point, because how many energy companies have gone out of business over the last 2 years?
Yeah.
28. So there's no such thing as competition anymore. Of course, we probably believe in the idea of privatization simply because there's competition. But if you've got 3 or 4 companies, global companies controlling everything, and you've got, at least in one case, one energy boss earning £11.3 million per year, that's without his bonuses, then
I do not know how you can justify that kind of living. I mean, you may be good, you're not that good.
I do have a question though. What do you think of the windfall tax? Because then this sort of fuels the argument that actually, if you're not going to bring down energy prices, we will tax you on those earnings and we will redistribute it. And from a conservative perspective, you're telling a company they made too much money, so you're going to take some of it back. It's just it's conservatives because it's not very pro-business. But on the other hand, you can understand the argument for it.
There are arguments on both sides of it, and I think we've heard a lot of talk about this over the last couple of weeks, and the politicians, of course, have been talking about this. Liz Truss is lukewarm, as I understand it, so is Rishi Sunak. Is kind of lukewarm on this as well. We'll have to see, but I just want to mention 2 points very quickly on this. Number one is solar panels. I was talking on Friday evening to a neighbour of mine in the corridors of the building where I live, who's a builder, and we were talking about solar panels.
Yeah.
So in countries like around the Mediterranean, Italy and Sicily and Malta, and certainly in Israel, when they first were created in 1948, they had solar panels because they weren't getting energy from the Arab countries because they weren't recognizing them. Those solar panels are still in existence today. Now, what that basically means is, because I think a lot of people don't understand it, they say green energy, whatever that means. What it means is that when the sun comes out, even if it just comes out for an hour, and as somebody who lived in Israel for many years, it was fantastic. Instead of using your electricity, you can actually rely on that sunshine beaming down on the roof. It's called a dud shemish, and even if it was just for an hour, you've still got shower water for about 2 hours.
Oh, I see. So did you have a tank on the roof as well?
But you don't see the tanks.
Yeah, so you do. It's invisible. But you see, in this country, we have a slightly different system. So I have solar panels. Now, the way it works is you feed it back into the grid. You then get paid back for the money, for the energy that you're creating. But actually, I think the system needs revision.
Yes.
We can't store energy properly. That's still another problem. But actually, it's about the energy mix, isn't it? Yes, solar brilliant. But actually, all new homes, I think, should be constructed with solar panels on the roof.
Out of the 2 main developers, I'm not going to mention their names, but the 2 main, they're pretty famous as well. Not one of them has actually built houses or homes, flats, whatever you want to call them, with solar panels. Not one of them.
Why?
Well, that's a good
But
question.
they should be legislated to do so.
Well, yeah, I think it's it's expensive. There'd be a huge reliance on solar power suppliers, which would probably be kind of.
You can have those and still have the grid. I'm not saying go off
I
grid.
think the mix is off. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
The mix is off. I know Kwasi Kwarteng was talking about trying to revitalize our nuclear power plants.
Bit late, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And by 2030, build some 8 new plants and all of that. And I just think, well, first of all, that's going to cost an exorbitant amount of money. Secondly, most of that money is going to the French. Thirdly, the amount of sort of planning, the sort of local council planning you would need. I don't think 2030.
So these are different. These are SMRs. They're not Magnox stations like the old ones. They're not PWR. So they are easier and cheaper. But yes, you're right. And also, surely we should own them by British companies because we need energy security. But I don't see what Keir Starmer's going to do because he's not going to get.
Well, demanding
Well,
isn't
he's going to
very
speak about it.
He's going to talk about it.
Publicity about it. It's going to make the front pages on certain newspapers, but nothing's going to happen because we don't have a functioning government at this time. We're waiting for one to happen. Exactly which candidate is going to get to number 10, she or he has got a great deal of work to do within a few days to get it implemented by the civil service in order for it to be discussed in the House of Commons and for us to be helped with our energy bills.
I just think people think the whole thing is rudderless, completely rudderless.
I mean, I find it funny that Keir Starmer thinks just demanding lower prices would work. If that was the case, wouldn't
I demand them.
Yeah, exactly. Prime Minister would just demand everything. I mean, Joe Biden tried this as well. Doing speeches saying, "Oil companies reduce your prices," and I just think, are you completely out of it?
I know.
Do you think just asking nicely is going to get you anywhere?
No, I don't think it is. Right, let's move on to your next one then.
Hose ban.
Yes, we talked about this a little at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about it. There is a Jewish word which is not translated in English.
Okay.
I'm going to try and help out over here. It's called chutzpah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we know what chutzpah means.
Chutzpah basically means it's like, wow, that's a real cheek you've got. That's you're really taking advantage, but it means much, much more than that. What a chutzpah. What a chutzpah
Isn't it-
that the
it's-
water boards
yeah.
actually have in asking us to don't use our water, certainly not to use the hose, when they are leaking thousands and thousands of gallons of water per day. Do you know exactly how much it is? To put that into context, it's actually more than 1,000 full-size Olympic swimming pools per day. The amount of water is leaking from their tanks, from their pipes. And why are they not doing anything about it? They don't want to upset their shareholders because they've got great dividends at this point as well. And this is a major problem. You're looking to say something.
No, I was just going to say it just seems wrong. I would say you can't pay the shareholders until you fix your leaks.
I mean, but this is the problem. The government has not held them accountable. It's always a sort of a double-edged sword, right? If you're going to privatize these industries, there need to be standards. The government needs to impose these standards. They need to do spot checks. They need to make sure that you're not taking the mickey out of it, because the whole point of privatizing industry is for greater efficiency, so the taxpayer doesn't have to shell out as much. But then if you don't do that, then you're basically saying just nationalize the industry, because at the end of the day, we're not getting the service that we're paying for.
Right.
And this is always the hard balance to strike. But again, this is rudderless leadership, and it's clear that for CEOs to get paid in excess of 10 million quid
Yep.
for effectively not providing a decent service is completely shambolic.
And I'm very glad you brought in the privatisation, because the water boards were privatised in 1989, of course, for obvious reasons, to bring in competition.
Exactly.
But we don't have competition.
No.
The large one of here is Thames Water in itself, and you
How
have
about water's owned by the Qataris, isn't it?
Well, I was going to come on to that, because out of the different water boards, let me just, Wessex Water is owned by a Malaysian company. So they're owned by shareholders around the world. Northumbria Water is 80% of that is owned by a Hong Kong businessman. Thames Water, by far the largest provider, wastes more than, well, we've already talked about how much is wasted as well. So therefore your investments, your dividends, your profits are actually going around the world. It's not benefit. And I'm just saying just to put it out there as well, if we were to re-nationalise, and I'm not a nationalised person. I'm old enough to remember going to school when Harold Walser was in power, when Jim Callum was in power.
Right.
So when Margaret Thatcher came in to give us competition, that was the whole objective. In other words, we were unhappy with our customer service, we just moved to another company. We're seeing less and less of that today, simply because we're not getting customer service, because people
But
are
you
working
can't
from home.
move. That's the point about water.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Now, if it was nationalised, that means that any profits that come from that actually go back
Into,
to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whoever he or she might be as well.
Yes,
That's
but Esther made a very good point. Nationalised industries are often not very well run.
They're not very
Look
well
at British
run, they're more
Rail.
expensive and they're less efficient. Listen, I don't have a problem with privatising your industry, but you have to be clever about it and you have to sort of change with the times, right? You can't have your industry being owned by regimes that are not really friendly to the UK. That's pretty common sense. You can't have, kind of across the board privatization without having standards that are constantly checked and constantly updated, right? Because at the end of the day, your loyalty is to the people that are receiving the service, not to these massive private companies. Yes, they're going to make profits one way or another, but if you're losing that much water in leaks and then have the audacity to tell the British public to stop using water, how dare you?
Yeah, why not?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Is what actually the paddling pools. You know those little paddling pools, most for kids. Most shops around the country have actually sold out of them.
I bet they
Everyone's
have.
buying them
Yeah.
because you fill up your paddling pool with water and you take the water from that paddling pool and you clean your car or you water the flowers, your grass, etc., etc. So it doesn't really do anything about it. And I just really want to highlight this simply because it is a chutzpah that the water boards are actually telling us what to do. That's the leadership skills. You judge a leader simply by leadership and act as
James,
a leader.
thank you very much indeed. It's been a great pleasure. James, thanks for coming in. This is Talk TV.